Welcome to the latest edition of the No-Till Farmer podcast brought to you by Yetter Farm Equipment. I'm John Dauberstein, Senior Editor of No-Till Farmer. In the final segment of this three-part podcast series, Dennis Michelsen and Michael Musselman, hosts of the podcast Innovations in Your Fields, powered by NewFields Ag, interview No-Till Farmer editor Frank Lessiter and Lessiter Media President Mike Lessiter about working together as a father-son team, and the importance of drafting and refining succession plans, whether it's a farming business or any business. They also discussed the inspiration behind Frank's newly released book, Frankly Speaking, a non-whitewashed first-hand account of no-till farming's rise over 50-plus years.
We've had a good conversation about no-till, its benefits, ROI, and kind of the history of that. What I wanted to do is spend a little time talking about the innovation in your business, of your media business, and the success of that. So, with 40 plus years in the business, many businesses fail in the first year, the first month, or in the first 2 or 3 years or 4 years. And so something from a success standpoint I wanted to ask is, could you highlight a couple of key times where you made some important decisions that moved you forward? And I'm sure Mike will step up and say, hey, hiring me was one of those good decisions, tongue in cheek. But tell us about where, I think there was a point, or was there a point where it almost seemed like that business wasn't going to work? And where was that? When was that? And when did you say it's really going to, and you stuck with it, if that was, in that case?
Well, when I was working for the other publisher and we started out, the goal was to have a magazine called No-Till Farmer that went to about 30,000 farmers. So we went to ag equipment dealers around the country and said, hey, give us the names and addresses of people who you think would be interested in no-till. So the goal was to get 30,000. By the time we did the first issue, we had 60,000 of these. And the ad support was not there for a magazine at that point. So we converted to a newsletter after maybe 3 years or so. And we kept the newsletter going 12 times a year. And then we would take some advertising inserts in some of the issues. And so for a few years, we did 2 issues a month, like January through May. And then later we got away from it. But today we do 8 newsletters and we do 4 magazines. And the other thing is, you asked me, in their 80s, when we bought it in the early 80s, and this was when the Secretary of Ag, Earl Butz, was saying plant fence row to fence row, border to border. So it got tough in those times, and it was tough for farmers, and it was tough for us too. But at the same time, it was a wake-up call for farmers because they got to cut their costs. And diesel fuel was going through the roof, and that helped no-till catch on. Plus Roundup and the new farm equipment, planters and sprayers, etc.
So one of the innovations in your business, and Mike, if you want to speak about this also with your comments, is
can I jump ahead of you real quick?
Yeah, that's fine. We can edit it. It's fine. Go ahead. You can answer that question too. Go ahead, Mike.
Your question that he may not have picked up on. And a defining moment in our company history and no-till in particular, it's what I would call the burn the boats moment that took place here. So the first 8 years of the company, there were 2 divisions. There was No-Till Farmer and there was Rural Builder, which was a farm building trade publication. And the 80s were brutal to everybody in agriculture, including our family business. And my dad had to sell off the construction magazine, the Farm Building News magazine. Had a relationship so that the company was 15 people, down to 3 or 4 about that time. And part of the deal was Dad had to work with the new publisher on that. And I was home for college. This was 1989, I believe it was. And Dad walked into my bedroom at home and I said, how you doing? How was your day up north? And he said, I did something today I hope you'll never do. I said, well, what's that? And he said, I walked out of that place. I couldn't work there anymore. They weren't doing things his way. It wasn't necessarily wrong. Wasn't going to work. So at that moment, No-Till Farmer became everything to the company. He burned the boats. He had one property left, and he had to move forward on that and doubled down. And the farmers were loyal to him, kept sending in those subscription checks. And he essentially rebuilt the company 1989 through 92, and then got back on his feet again and started expanding again about the time I started my career in Chicago. So there wasn't room for me when I graduated school, but he, through perseverance, he and my mother's grit and perseverance, they rebuilt this thing, and everything we got today is a thank you to the no-till farmers who supported us during that time.
And that's a theme. I appreciate you talking about that. That's the grit and determination going through the problems. And, I think in the way that you all present your magazines and you present your conferences and the things you do, I think it comes out, that appreciation comes out of how you're giving back to them for what they're doing.
Glad to hear that.
Tell us. Go ahead, Frank.
We had an idea for the National No-Tillage Conference for a couple of years, and we did nothing with it. And then Monsanto came out with 3 or 4 no-till conferences around the country. And I decided if we were ever going to do this, we needed to do it right now, or we're going to lose our place. And Monsanto supported us, even though they had their own conferences. I mean, for years, for a number of years, they were always a sponsor of this. Well, anyway, for the first conference in Indianapolis, we had a woman that worked for us, and she was going to set up the event. And I said, go down to Indianapolis, and you get us a place to hold the conference, and you get us some hotel rooms. She said to me, how many hotel rooms do you think we need? And I said, if we get 200 people to this conference, I'll be happy. We ended up with close to 800. And we had outgrown the hotel before we set foot in it. And that sleeping rooms weren't a problem because you could send them to other hotels. But the conference rooms were a problem. So we had meals. And so the hotel said to us, 600, that's all we can do. We can't do any more than that. Well, we kept begging them, and they finally went to 800, and they said, we got an idea for you, but it's a lousy idea, but you can do it if you want. And I said, what's that? They said, we can't feed all these people in one room. But if you were willing to feed 2/3 of them on the first floor, and the other third, maybe on the 10th or 12th floor, we can make this work. And then they could come down and listen to the speaker talk. And I said, you're right. It's a lousy idea, but let's do it.
That's great. That's great.
So, Frank, was there ever a time in the history of No-Till Farmer that you were like, screw it, this isn't going to work? Or were you just too stubborn to ever get to that point?
I guess I was too stubborn. I mean, we had some hard times. And after we got rid of the magazine, it went to Rural Farm Builders. It was kind of nice for 2 or 3 years. There were only 3 of us. I didn't have any HR problems with anybody. Well, I did, but that was with my wife. But we had one other employee, so it was kind of nice for a few years. We were not making any money at that time, but it was kind of nice not to have big troubles. Went to Europe for 3 weeks.
That's a great answer, by the way. I love that.
Here's something that I like to ask about is, Frank, tell us about your first tractor you drove and maybe what's your favorite tractor today?
It was a Ford Jubilee. I think it was 1953. Ford came out with a 50-year tractor, and we had one of those. And then we had a Farmall Super H. But when I was growing up, we still had draft horses. And the funny thing was, I never wanted to drive the draft horses, and all I wanted to do is drive the tractor. And now we got an equine magazine, and I wonder why I didn't want to drive the draft horses before.
That's great.
And I think the Super H, I think my brother-in-law still has it. I think they still use it.
So Frank and Mike, seems like you're getting along well. Not too many HR problems between you in the moment anyway, with this interview.
That's because I give in all the time.
Well, that's great. I respect this concept that, Mike, you've come in for 20 years and been able to work with your father. Sometimes people can't work with family members very well. And so that speaks to a very good mutual respect for one another. And can you tell us a little bit about what was the spark that brought you back to the business, Mike?
It was a desire to work alongside my old man. I had worked at the same place for 12 years, and it was a great career, and they opened up all kinds of doors for me. But I was drawn to what he had. That he was running his own store, for better or for worse. Brought his passion every day and then put it down on the table. There wasn't any ceiling on it, and I think that's what brought me here. There was also the promise of, if we could get our act together, we'd go out and buy some more publications, which we did in the first year I was here. We bought farm equipment, ag equipment intelligence, and farm innovations. We acquired 3 publications. And I think part of the reason some of this worked is, up until then, I've been sort of in an administrative role, executive VP, trying to change a culture that was going to be set up for the future, management oriented. And the day we made that acquisition, I had something of my own to run and, demonstrate to him, of course, that I had the skills to make this happen, but also do it in a slightly different way than had been done. We have different styles, but we wanted the same thing. And there's some rough spots like in everyone, but we also were smart enough to get a strategic planner who we both knew and trusted very well, by the name of Don Henning, who helped us through those rough spots and took the edges off.
So one of the reasons we've been successful with Michael running the dealer magazines is I kept my hands off them.
Yes, that can be difficult. Yeah, that can be difficult. It's interesting. It can be a difficult subject. I talk to a lot of farmers. I see transitions on the farms going. I've seen things happen in people that I know in my extended family. And, what we hope doesn't happen in farming is that the 50 or 60-year-old son is still not being able to manage and run things because the 70 or 80-year-old father still wants to kind of keep the control of everything. And I think that's an important thing, and why I brought it up is this concept of transitions. We're in a major point of transitions in today's agriculture situation, where land is changing hands, business are changing hands, and we see it more and more where even the grandson is now in the operation with the father and the grandfather. So I just bring that up as an encouraging a way where, it's respectable that Frank, that you're able to accept him back in, be proud, be forethoughtful, and to really welcome the opportunity that over a period of time that your son can take the reins, and you can feel bold and confident in that.
Well, we'll be in a social gathering someplace, and someone will say to me, "How come you're not retired?" I tell people I'm as old as dirt. But anyway, I said, well, I still like writing. I still enjoy it. And I said, my goal is to spend 50% of my time writing what I want to write, and the other 50% complaining about how Michael's running the company. And he will say, well, you're halfway.
He's really good at that second half, I'll say. But to their credit, I think my parents had great foresight here, and it applies to all your listeners, Dennis. is succession planning is something you really have to work at and prepare for. And they had been working on it even before I came back. I mean, we were having discussions about it, putting the things on the table, getting the third-party consultants involved on how to make it work. And I'm blessed that my parents had that foresight, because we got to a plan that was going to work for everyone.
We'll come back to the episode in a moment, but first I'd like to thank our podcast sponsor, Yetter Farm Equipment. Yetter Farm Equipment has been providing farmers with solutions since 1930. Today, Yetter is your answer for finding the tools and equipment you need to face today's production agriculture demands. The Yetter lineup includes a wide range of planter attachments for different planting conditions, several equipment options for fertilizer placement, and products that meet harvest time challenges. Yetter delivers a return on investment in equipment that meets your needs and maximizes inputs. Visit them at yetterco.com.
We were out in the Palouse once, eastern Washington, and riding in a combine with a guy named Dick Whitman. And Dick is a kind of a farm business consultant. And all he wanted to talk about is what succession plans we had for the company. I mean, that was really critical to him. And I answered most of the questions to his satisfaction. But they run a big operation, maybe 10,000 acres, and they got a plan in place for everybody. And they got cousins and brothers in the operation, and they're making it work.
Well, that's wonderful. Frank, can you tell us maybe something as a key item or a key point of something that you've learned from Mike, your son, through all of this?
I guess we go back to what Dennis said, return on investment. It's easy to do things that you want to do that don't necessarily make money. We've had some big arguments about something that I really liked that wasn't making any money. I've had an idea for 20 years of starting a popcorn magazine or a newsletter, because I'm popcorn freak, and everybody says it won't work. And finally, my wife said to me, she says it won't work. It's stupid. I said, well, there's a chocolate magazine, and she says, exactly, it's chocolate. It's not popcorn. But anyway, the kids, when they were little, would say, when are you going to start the popcorn magazine? And the answer was, on Monday, next Monday, we're going to start it. Well, it never happened. But then finally, my wife got tired of listening to this. And she said, okay, take the money and start it. You're going to flop at it, but I'm tired of you talking about it. And then it was never so much fun since I had the okay to do it. Never done it.
But there's investors open to pursue that idea if any of your listeners want to do it, because I don't think it's going to happen in Lessiter Media.
We could, if you can get us $1 million from a venture capitalist, we'll start it.
Well, Mike, in the same vein, on that item, tell me something important that, a takeaway that, you've learned from Frank, your father, in all of this.
That's an easy one. It's passion. Passion. You're going to do something, do it to the best of your ability. Try to make a difference in your customer's life, not just chasing a dollar, but for in this case, we've had no-tillers come up to us and say to me, your dad changed my life. We got to where we could farm more acres with fewer people and less machinery cost. And, I think you spend any time on those kinds of things, it's easy to get up in the morning and do your job. And it's because he's had a burning passion his entire career, and he's helped me find what mine is and had me looking at that. So that and his approach to content is we're not doing fluff pieces and BS pieces where everything's supposed to be actionable that we do. And I've learned that more here than anywhere else I've been.
Well, those are wonderful comments. So passion and maybe a little bit of critical thinking and consideration on the way that something may go would be two critical points that we could take away from that, from you working together. As we move, yes, sir.
We started some things that didn't work out, and we dumped them or got rid of them. One of them, we started a newsletter in the 90s on ridge still farming. And I had the idea for this, and we sent out a subscription pitch in early December. And my decision was by the 20th or 22nd, just before Christmas, we're going to decide whether this will work or not. And the people at Buffalo who made ridge till equipment in those days let me use their mailing list. And by the 20th of December, we had checks in the mail for maybe 2,000 subscribers. So we did this for 3-4 years. But we really, and we didn't lose any money on it, but we didn't make it a lot either. But we decided there was no future for us in ridge till farming because the potential audience was too small. So we just quit. We just stopped doing it. And then maybe 10 years long, maybe a little longer, we started Strip Till Farmer, and that's done well for us because we have 4 times a year publication, and then we're doing the National Strip Till Conference, which is coming up in Madison in a couple of weeks.
Well, those are great comments about both the items and the innovations that made your business move forward. And I think another key piece there is when you figured out that you were maybe going down the wrong path, you decided that you're going to change your mind. And I think that's one of the key takeaways. That's something that I've learned over time is that we make decisions as best we can with the information we have. And we try to make a good decision. And sometimes we try to make the perfect decision, but we can't always make it perfect in the end. So I guess the success is understanding where the failures were. And that's where innovation comes from, right? You're willing to try, you're willing to do. And if it fails, you continue to do other things to go towards that success.
I like to tell the story on this of somebody will come to me with an idea, and if I don't think it'll work, I'll tell them. But there's a lot of ideas you don't know whether they'll work or not. You may say to somebody, "So what's it going to cost us to do this idea?" And they may say, "I think we could find out for $1,500." Well, I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I say go ahead and do it. And after 2 months, they'll come to me and say, "Hey, you should never let me do this, or it worked and we can build something on it." But at the same time, we might have saved some of that $1,500 if we had just gone in the bathroom and threw $20 bills in the toilet for 45 minutes.
Sometimes things can turn out that way. So as we kind of finish the discussion today, it's been a great time. One of the things I wanted to, you had mentioned to us is that you're working on a new book, and it's called Frankly Speaking. And it's a compilation of 50 years of your editorials from the No-Till Farmer magazine. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why people may be interested in picking that up or calling in or writing in to order that book?
Yeah, I'm not so sure that the writing is really top notch, but the topics were. I mean, they're just on it, and it's really another history of no-till. And I got the index right here. I think there's 635 columns that I've written over the 50 years that are in this book. And even back in 1972, we did one that said no-till is not for everyone. And we did one, are the environmentalists winning, which is probably true today. Another one was, will we ever have to plow? And I took after some of the manufacturers different times for dumb things they've done. It's been fun. I've done some serious things. I've done some funny things. I've done some things that tick people off. So it's been fun doing that. And we did one in the late 70s called Why No-Till Won't Work. And it's just been fun doing these.
I'll tell you a story, Michael, Dennis, about when we had acquired Farm Equipment Magazine, Ag Equipment Intelligence. We were sitting here thinking back in the office. Frank has been telling his subscribers for the last 30, 40 years that they didn't need this heavy machinery. They're like, oh, what are the manufacturers and dealers going to say about it? It wasn't really much of anything in 2004 when we got going, but there were some early columns, and you'll see it in the book when we get one to you. He took them on. He called BS. He had some rants. He had some "I told you so's." There was it's a lively book. It's a fun read.
Well, we'll look forward to getting a copy of that. When will it be out and available?
We're scheduled to get them back from the printer on August 19th.
Wonderful.
Here's what the cover looks like.
All right. Frankly Speaking has a picture of Frank. And what's the subtitle?
A non-whitewashed first-hand account of no-till farming's rise over 50 plus years. It's interesting to look at because the topics tell the history of no-till.
And the non-whitewash, the reason we have that in here is he's presenting these articles were presented as they were at the time. Rants, "I told you so's," taking someone to task, calling BS. It's all there. And there's some that he didn't turn out to be right on it, but we're presenting it as it was presented back in that day.
Frank, so 50 plus years of experience doing this. And I'm going to ask you the most unfair question that anybody could ever ask you. Is there a particular article, a particular subject that you are most proud of the way you covered it during your career?
Well, that's a tough one, and I haven't thought much about it in the last 5 years or so. I think the one that I really think is really good is the time the guy chisel plowed the no-till ground, and you saw what the results were on 100 acres and what he had lost. We've run that a number of times, and it gets on digital. It gets a lot of views for that. We also took on Paraquat versus Monsanto in the early days, and if we hadn't had Paraquat, we wouldn't have no-tills here in the States. So,
if I can prompt him a little bit, talk about those stories that you got unsolicited, even about how no-till. We had an anniversary, 50-year anniversary issue, I think it was, and farmers wrote to you and told you how you changed their lives. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of gratitude on my part, and I try to be humble about it. But there's people who said we saved their farm or made it possible for our son to farm with us. We were able to expand. We got a no-tiller down just north of Indianapolis who's doing really well on maybe 2,000 acres. And he took on another 600 acres this year to farm just without adding any equipment or adding any employees. So they're making it work. And we've had a lot of people come to our no-till conference from around the world: Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Africa. And a lot of these people are just farming 3 or 4 acres. And I remember once at one of the Monsanto conferences, they had a speaker there, and what made no-till catch on in Asia was the women, the farm wives that were farming rice, etc. And they were doing all the work while their husbands were going into town, sitting in the coffee shop. So the women were really interested in cutting labor, cutting costs. And they, at that time, this was probably 15 years ago, that's what made no-till catch on in some of the poverty countries in Asia. Then we got people in Kentucky and like that who are double cropping. I mean, they got 1,200 acres and they're harvesting 1,800 acres by running wheat or barley ahead of double crop soybeans.
Well, Frank and Mike, it's been a wonderful time. I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours, and we love the stories of innovation and success and what you've learned over 50 years working in this industry. And there's all kinds of different things we can do and say in life. But I got for a man of your legacy, your wisdom, and your age, I have a real important question I just wanted to ask you. Frank, can you tell us, as we end the show here today, can you tell us what matters most?
Well, I think what matters most is we've played a key role in getting no-till here in the States from 3.3 million acres to about 110. And I don't have the answers. The answers that we've reported over the years all came from farmers and educators. It's not me, but I do feel proud of whatever role we played in making this work. And worldwide, I mean, the website, we've got like from 1989 until today, we got 13,000 articles on the no-till website that deal with no-till. And we don't have, this was before the web came out. So from 1972 to 1989, those articles are not on the website. One of these days we may get some of them up there, but it's just been a great experience. I've enjoyed it, and I've believed in it for 50 years, and I guess that's why I've never tried to do something else.
Memorable moment at the National No-Tillage Conference is a farmer was talking about no-till farmer, their staff, everything, and he called Dad here the Johnny Appleseed of no-till. And like Frank said a moment ago, it wasn't his technique, his own recipe, his own agenda. What he did is he went and collected what works and didn't work from farmers who were doing it, and then, like Johnny Appleseed, sprinkled it out there throughout the U.S. and also globally. There was they've embraced no-till as much globally as they have here in the United States. And so I always like that Johnny Appleseed of no-till comment.
Somebody that really believed in us, who Michael, was Howard Martin, who passed away a few months ago. But
yes,
Howard always had compliments for us, always read everything from every word in the newsletter and backed us on anything we did. And Howard would tell you when he was farming that no-till saved the farm for him.
Yes, it did. And and he took what he learned in no-till and then innovated with his patents and became a supplier in the industry to even expand no-till to one of the greatest extents out there, based upon the attachments that he brought in. So there's a great example of the inspiration and the information where both of you work together back and forth, hand in hand, to promote this concept and how it really spread over this period of time. So
the major manufacturers took a while to catch on to no-till because they didn't want to. But the short line manufacturers are the ones who really came out with attachments, modifications that made no-till work.
For over 50 years, No-Till magazine has been telling the story about innovative practices, innovations in your fields. Frank and Mike, thank you so much for joining us today for this journey through the last 50 years.
Our pleasure.
Great fun. Thank you for doing this.
That's it for this episode of the No-Till Farmer Podcast. We'd like to thank Dennis Michelsen and Michael Musselman for taking the time to interview Mike and Frank for this fascinating account of no-till history and where we stand today. We also want to thank our sponsor, Yetter Farm Equipment, for helping to make this podcast possible. A transcript of this episode and our archive of previous podcast episodes are both available at no-tillfarmer.com/podcasts. If you're interested in the books Frank Lessiter has written about no-till, go to our website at no-tillfarmer.com, visit the store section, and go to the books section, or click on the link in our podcast description. For Frank and Mike Lessiter and our entire staff here at No-Till Farmer, I'm John Dauberstein. Thanks for listening, keep on no-tilling, and have a great day.